welcome judges, questioners, contestants, family and friends, Lions and Lionesses, to our annual speak-off. I'm not sure now, but I think this has been on go for, at least 20 years. Seems like I've been there these many times introducing the speak-off, but anyway. We have 4 speakers tonight. Speaking order was determined by draw. They'll be speaking now momentarily. Any applaud that you have, probably we can hang off until the speakers have spoken. And questioners, there's 2 questioners, by the way. They ask 1 question of each speaker. So there'll be 2 questions for each speaker then. And after the questions and they finish their speeches and things, by all means, give them a great round of applause. So that's pretty much it. I'll just call on speaker number 1 and we'll get the show on the road.
Good evening, Lions and Lionesses, ladies and gentlemen, judges, questionnaires, fellow contestants. Tonight I'm going to speak on an issue that probably affects just about everybody in this room and most people across the province and across Canada. This issue is government regulations. New regulations are being put in place just about every day and just about everything. It seems as if much of the time they are for obvious causes, but all too often they are simply unnecessary restrictions. Pretty soon we'll need to have a fee, license, or permit to do pretty well anything in our province. We'll be limited to our choice of recreational activities. It seems as if they're trying to push out the locals and welcome in tourists or visitors. We should ask ourselves, are we as Newfoundlanders or Canadians being regulated to death? When a government or another body brings in place or proposes a new regulation, they always claim to have reasons associated with safety and conservation. They should keep both of these in mind as they are of utmost importance, but there should be a way to deal with them without overlooking the logical solution or simply going too far. A key example of going too far would be the new boating regulations that have been established by the Canadian Coast Guard. These regulations include new age restrictions, new safety requirements, and most of all, a new recreational boater's competency test and course. In doing this course, every person who wishes to operate his or her pleasure craft in Canada must have a card stating that they can operate a boat. This course, which is before the test, must be taught by a Coast Guard official or another so-called certified instructor. This does not make sense. Some people have been on the water pretty much all their lives, and now, before going on the water again after a certain deadline, must have some other person tell them they can't operate their own boat. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. It would seem logical if they made novice boaters do such a course. This way, the process would be generally phased in, and eventually all boaters would be safety educated. This would also decrease on the uproar and the total confusion caused by imposing upon everyone at this time. Speaking of confusion, this seems like one of the most familiar results of government's new regulations. To see this, one would simply have to look at the new 3-year salmon management plan that was just released by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. This plan, as it should, has conservation as its top priority. However, with keeping conservation in mind, they still should be able to develop a plan that can be read and understood by the average person. In this plan, there is no straightforward list of conservation measures. Instead, they have each river class, numbers 1 through 4. This seems simple enough, but there should be some other way of doing this, because each class has different season quotas, daily bait limits, and different opening and closing dates. Yet, they still all have the same number of tags to put on retained fish. Is this really necessary? In fact, this year, just to give instructions what tag to use and in which order to do so, is a full-page press release. This does not make much sense. You would think that when talking about conservation, you would make everything as simple as possible so everybody could read the regulations and then follow them more closely. This way, everyone would be working together as a team, working towards our goal, which would be to preserve our salmon stocks and aim towards conservation. Also, the DFO seems good at bringing in other regulations which are unpopular with people, many of which are necessary, but others which are not. A key example of one that is really necessary was was in 1992 when they brought in the cod moratorium. Of course, this is a realistic restriction since cod run the brink of extinction. But since then, there have been many others which I cannot see a really logical reason for. Just look at last year's recreational cod fishery. This fishery was open to all of Atlantic Canada and Quebec. Newfoundland was only allowed a 3-day fishery with 10 fish per person per day, while Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and PEI were allowed over a 2-month fishery with 5 fish per person a day. They said the reason was conservation, which seems very logical. But when you look at the fine lines, there's a note. Area 3PS has had the greatest increase of cod stocks since the moratorium in 1992 is adjacent to Newfoundland, yet it was given only a 3-day fishery. Now there is no logical information to back up this now. The government has simply overlooked the most logical solution and went ahead with their own guidelines for putting in the restrictions. Another big issue was brought out by Federal Fisheries Minister David Anderson in a press release on June 30th, 1998. In this press release, he said, quote, "Discussions with the provinces on a marine recreational fishery are to happen in the future. The goal is to implement the new license in 1999. So we all know what that means. We're soon going to have a license even to jig a codfish in Newfoundland. Upon saying this, we all are now just to the mercy of our governments as to what they will put upon us next. Pretty soon we will feel restricted or trapped in our own environments, with no rights to our own resources whatsoever. We should ask ourselves once again, are we being regulated to death?" Thank you.
Question number 1, please.
The regulation often says is for the purpose of safety and conservation. Some people look at regulation and licensing as a big money grab. How do you feel about this?
Well, I think you're perfectly right on where the money grab comes in. Because there's no real big reason to have, like, total regulations and everything. Like, you're talking about bringing a new license for cod fishery. This license isn't only to limit the number of people going in the water, but also, you're not going to give us that license for free. That license would probably be up to $20 range, just like salmon licenses are now. So it is for to make some financial gain as well. Thank you.
Question number 2.
You mentioned in your speech about unpopular regulations that are coming in. Could you try to define for me what is the difference between a popular regulation and an unpopular regulation? Not using an example, but more explain to me what would be the difference.
Okay, well, popular, you look at it with, well, you would say, is popular to people, as in what people think is right or agree with. Well, unpopular would be something that people do not agree with and make big uproars about and demonstrations about. So, as I said before, popular is not always right, and right is not always popular. That's what I said in the speech. So, really, popular would just have the people feel. Like that's the definition of right people, not definitely what's right for conservation. So of course, you need to look at both of them and why they make it. Thank you.
Lil Khan, speaker number 2.
Good evening, ladies. Can you hear me? As long as I can hear you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, judges, and fellow speakers. The topic I decided to speak on tonight is the changing role of women in society, specifically the role of females in the workplace. Throughout most of history, women generally have had fewer legal rights and peer opportunities than men. Wifehood and motherhood were regarded as women's most significant professions. In the 20th century, however, women in most nations has won the right to vote and increased their educational and job opportunities. But despite these accomplishments and contributions, women have still not gained equality. there are still 4 long ways to go. World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II accelerated a number of changing trends for women. For example, industrial expansion increased women's earning power and placement opportunities. Before this time, most of the lowest paid jobs in the industry were filled by women. They would take whatever job they could, and they were known as doers of industrial homework. But World War I brought new opportunities for women. In the course of a decade, because of necessity, a number of women gained standing in the professions that men once had. This change for women did not last long. The stock market crash in 1929 triggered the loss of many economic gains, and the Great Depression of the 30s brought the economy to a near halt. As a result, women became very well acquainted with the phrase that they were the last to be hired and the first to be fired. But having had a taste of power and independence, women were not willing to give up and go back to the home and behave as if nothing had happened. They became more involved in politics, for example. Women like Nellie McClung began to campaign for female suffrage, prohibition, and other reforms. She was instrumental in gaining women the right to vote in Canada in 1918. She also led the way for focusing attention on the need for women to gain economic independence. McClung and others saw that women can do more than be housewives. It was obvious there was a need for a change. The tough times during the stock market crash and the Great Depression reinforced the idea that change was needed. Women were forced to look for work to make a better life for themselves and for their families. They took risks and became demanding. They made a stand in the working world, and as a result, changes were made to the working environment. Although it took a lot of work, the role of women evolved over time. The downside to all this economic gain is the fact that women are still not equal to men in the wages they earn or even the jobs they hold. Most women working in the business world are employed in entry-level jobs that take years to move up on the corporate ladder. Many employers cannot get past the outdated ideas of women's domestic work to today's working woman. This is one important cause of that problem. Females sometimes face harassment on the job due to these outdated ideas. But this discrimination, based on underestimation of women's skills, experience, and education, has not stopped women's fight for equality. The number of working women has more than tripled since the periods preceding World War I. The desire for an improved sense of self-worth and a more varied life role has brought more women into the workplace. And slowly, the acceptance of women as workers has increased female population in the labor force. Changes in the workforce have certainly allowed us to see that women have surely made a stand in society. But even though women constituted 45% of the employed people in the U.S. in the late 80s, they held only a small share of the decision-making jobs. Despite the Equal Pay Act of 1963, women in 1970 were paid 45% less than that of men for the same job. In 1988, the figure rose to 32% less. Thus, there was little improvement. Also, professional women do not get the important assignments and promotions given to their male colleagues. These statistics show us that although women have made major stands in society, they may never be considered equal to their male counterpart. In 1930, about 2% of all American lawyers and judges were women. In 1989, the figure rose to just above 22%. Similar results came from the teaching profession. More women in the late 80s taught at the elementary to high school level. In higher education, however, women held only 1/3 of the teaching professions, and those employed were concentrated on fields such as social services and home economics. These statistics show us that while women's status has greatly improved, it still has a long way to go if the aim is equality. The changing role of women in society has started to change the workplace. Although stereotypes about women holding roles only as housewives and mothers continue to exist, women have made major steps towards independence and equality. It is up to the women of our generation today to continue with the leadership tradition established by women during World War I. Women will be second-class citizens only if we allow it to happen. Thank you.
Question number 2.
In 1982, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms held equality laws, which made it illegal and unconstitutional to differentiate on the basis of sex. Why do you think more cases haven't come before the courts in Canada to bring more equal rights to women, which would seem to be a sort of a quicker way to get there?
Perhaps because women are maybe just a little bit more passive than men and don't want to make a fuss over a little thing maybe by not getting a job, but you must realize that it's really important if you're discriminated against on a job and not getting what you want because a person is being biased because you are a woman. Thank you.
Women make up approximately 52% of our population. Now, we recently had a provincial election, and the number of women running for candidacy was minimal, probably about 8 to 12%. Can you give a reason, or why do you think women are not offering themselves as political candidates?
Women are probably not offering themselves as political candidates because the kind of job that takes you away from the home, and it is women that really want to be home and raise their kids, and they want a job where they can work and they can be home. And being in politics doesn't sort of get that. And not only that, women follow example, and men, as like before, dominated politics, and probably will continue to, since women only take up like 10% of the government, like you said. Thank you.
Speaker number 3, please.
Good evening, everyone. In preparation for this event, I asked myself, what are some controversial issues in our society? And well, I thought, many things. The most common ones include AIDS, abortion, sex education, television violence. These are things that we hear debated all the time. But ask yourselves this question. Does society influence our lives as individuals? Some may argue that it does, others may argue that it doesn't. Personally, I think society influences us greatly. Society influences what we say, do, think, or react in a given situation. The results, of course, can be good or bad, depending upon the individual and situation. For this evening, I have decided to talk about the influences of society. But I want to discuss something that is beyond what I have just mentioned. It is the actual expectations that society has for us, which may lead to the development of eating disorders. Unfortunately, few people know that it exists, but it does. You see, society wants males and females to be perfect. The implication from society is that if you're not perfect, then you won't be happy, successful, and most of all accepted in today's society. Being perfect involves being thin, beautiful, intelligent, exhibiting a wide variety of hobbies, and being friendly. The main focus, however, being thinness and beauty. To put it lightly, society cannot tolerate obesity. Society wants males and females to be thin and have the ideal body image. Society implies that a thin body is equal to sexiness and is desirable. This ideal feminine, however, is most often impossible. The media, clothes designers, manufacturers, and advertisers have created this trend toward thinness. Simply open a magazine and you will become aware of thin models and stars. Women then are given the message that the only way to be happy is to be thin. This idealizing extreme slenderness encourages real women to hate their bodies and in the end develop either anorexia or bulimia. Teenagers, for example, are under a lot of pressure to be thin. In the United States alone, over 1,000 young women are starving themselves at this very minute to try to attain the ideal figure in fear of public scrutiny and humiliation. Take the world-class gymnast Christy Hendricks, for example. At the peak of her gymnastic performance, she weighed only 93 pounds. It was casually mentioned by a judge that she was too fat to make the Olympic team. That one remark resulted in a 4-year starvation period in which she lost 46 pounds, eventually resulting in her death. It is the pressures from society that causes people like Christy to be victims of societal expectations. But not only do magazines and television present anorexic models as a paradigm of sexual desirability. They also heavily market weight reduction programs. Every magazine claims to have the diet to end all diets. These ads all imply the same message. Once you lose the weight, you will be joyfully happy. However, each month there seems to be another new diet with the latest way to shed those extra pounds. This month's feature, Thrive Up. However, sadly enough that it won't take long for one to realize that these programs will only cause disappointment and disillusionment. The emphasis on perfection leads to, for many, the development of eating disorders, as I mentioned earlier. It may be that one bases his or her life on societal expectations. Watching shows like Melrose Place and Beverly Hills 90210 strains teenagers to believe that looking like these celebrities is necessary. They don't realize that many of these actresses and actors have endured long hours of exercise and have been deprived of proper nourishment in order to maintain a thin figure. Some even resort to plastic surgery, liposuction, breast implants. Every year, 40,000 Americans flock to cosmetic surgeons hoping to make themselves perfect. One only has to watch an episode of Baywatch to see where this idealism comes from. Society is brainwashing people into believing that being thin is necessary. Does one really have to be a clone of societal expectations? People need to realize is that it is our character flaws and differences which makes us unique and special. We need to start loving ourselves and accepting each other for who we are. Beauty is not skin deep. Thank you.
Question number 1, please.
How do you think that we, of in the field of education, can develop our children or students to respect themselves and to develop self-esteem so that they're, even though they're inundated with all this, these images of being thin and free, how can we help them feel good about themselves so that they are not subjected to or they don't fall into the habit of trying to be thin and looking at themselves, I'm only good if I'm thin.
So in other words, what you're saying is that how to get them to have self-confidence in themselves, even though people are pressuring like them to be thin in all these magazines. Well, really it's hard. It's going to take time. I mean, like the poem, it takes time, what Shirley Eckhardt said. It takes time to move a mountain. It takes time for love to be. You're never really caged in, and you're never really free. It takes time for the answers to be dealt with properly, but everybody knows it takes time. I mean, if you feel that you have to be like these actors and actresses that you see on TV, I mean, how true are you going to be to yourself? But, like you said, we have to teach our kids in order to accept themselves. And I think certain programs, like health programs, like in the health subject area, that maybe there could be like certain chapters that could teach people to build their self-esteem. Because building your self-esteem takes time. And that's something that I really think that schools should be made aware of and help kids to build upon. Thank you.
Your argument, to sort of sum it up in a rather simplistic way, seems to be that media is influencing society and society's expectations in relation to beauty. How would you respond to the argument that it is society that actually influences the media? In this century alone, in the 20s, the very thin sort of female body structure was the ideal. Then in the 50s, it was more of the hourglass Marilyn Monroe figure and full-figured for females. And now we seem to have gone back the other way. So one might argue that it's actually society and its expectations that influence media and how we perceive it. How would you respond to that?
I don't really understand the question.
Your argument seems to be that it's the media that influences society's expectations of itself. You mentioned like Baywatch, Melrose Place, 90210. How would you respond to the argument that it's society that is actually influencing the media?
Well, society, like I said, has certain expectations of us. And the thing is, not very many people know that exists. I mean, how many of you realize that men, for example, have to have muscular bodies, they have to have high cheekbones, prominent nose, and things like that. And women, again, are expected to have like a thin body, a waist-hip ratio of 0.5, and again, blonde hair, blue eyes, size 5 figure, 6 feet tall, that sort of thing. And you can make the argument that society is influencing the media to make those, I guess, ideal feminine more aware to people. But I really think that it's the media that is making this ideal feminine possible. I can't really say that it's society that makes the media do that. Thank you.
Speaker number 4.
America was once a paradise of timberland and stream, but it is dying now because of greed and money. Lost in 1,000 little kings who slashed the forests all to hell and would not be controlled, and changed the climate and stole the rainfall and the posterity. And it won't be long now. It won't be long till the deserts are here. From the Alleghenies to the Rockies, the deserts are coming. Good evening, lions, lioness, parents, guests, and fellow speakers. The topic I've chosen to speak on this evening is our responsibility. The responsibility of this generation to the next. We, by our forefathers, have been left a legacy of mass consumption. The mass consumption of renewable and non-renewable resources. Just look at our cattle fishery. Right now, overfishing by the previous generations has left us with a moratorium. Our water supply and food supply, once thought to have quantities that could never run out, has dwindled because of mass consumption and mass pollution. Pollution has decreased our supply of clean water. Our Great Lakes, responsible for 20% of the world's consumable water supply, are polluted beyond imagination. So thickly polluted that it looks as if you can walk on them. That's what we've been left. Reduced forest areas, an endangered species list with well over 1,000 species on it, and an extinct species list to go along with it. We have got to leave behind something better. We have been left, however, a mixed bag. We have been given awareness. The awareness of what destruction mankind can cause. The generation before us wasn't given that. They assumed that the world had an endless supply of whatever they'd been given. A water supply that would never run out. Animals who were infinite in number, or who could repopulate so fast as to never have their population depleted. A food supply so bountiful that it could always feed the world. They were innocent of their detrimental effects. They weren't given the knowledge of what happens when they abuse their environment. From all of that, we've been given knowledge. The knowledge that we have control of our environment, and that if we want to remain a species on this earth, we have to take care of it. We are aware of the fact that if we continue to destroy our rainforest, global warming is imminent. The rainforest is key to our survival. We just have to take the action to make sure that it remains. We know it. We have the knowledge. Knowledge enough to know that our water supply is threatened. It's pointless to have water if you can't use it. So what are we doing? We are destroying the rainforest, decreasing the water supply. In the end, we will be left with deserts, and mankind is not a species that can thrive in the desert. Our responsibility is to take care of our endangered species, to stop polluting our planet, to replant our forest, to provide alternatives to cutting down the rainforest. We have the knowledge to do so. Let the people native to the areas of the rainforest profit from the trees and from what the trees produce. Provide alternative jobs for them, and if we let them cut down an area, teach them to fertilize the land properly, so that in 2 years they don't have to move their farms when all the nutrients have been drained from the soil. We have the money and the knowledge to do so. We were left that in our legacy, and that's the least we can do for the next generation. Give them a planet in which they can live comfortably. We are responsible for them and to them. It is our responsibility to leave them a legacy of which they and we can be proud. Give them a fresh start. and a clean and profitable planet. Let's give them something to build on. They too will learn from us. Men talk of money and industry, of hard times and recoveries, of finance and economics, but the ants wait and the scorpions wait. For while men talk, they are making deserts, all the time getting the world ready for the conquering ant. Drought and erosion in deserts, because men cannot learn. Rainfall passing off in flood and freshen, and carrying good soil with it, because there are no longer forests to withhold the water and the billions of particles of their roots. But this doesn't have to happen. We can change, and we must change. It is our responsibility. The supreme reality of our time is the vulnerability of this planet, and we are only passengers in the spaceship we call Earth. Thank you.
Question number 2, please.
99.9% of all species that ever lived on this planet are extinct. Scientists say that our population, as it grows within the next 30 years to reach up to 10 billion people, can't sustain us no matter what we do. What would your response be to someone who told you that we are going the way of the dinosaur and there's nothing we can do about it?
Well, I have to disagree with that point because I really do think that if we tried hard enough and protected the species that we do have left, because there are still species being discovered right now. Like every second, new species, especially from the rainforest, are being discovered. And I think that we have the power, the money, and the knowledge to take control of our lives and control of our future. Because even though there are always going to be problems we face, especially in the third world countries, with food shortages and water shortages, there's always going to be a place, hopefully, where we can carry on, especially if we learn to take care of it. Thank you.
Harvesting of the forest, clearing of the rainforest. Big corporations are interested in profits, and they're not too concerned with the next generation. What can we do to influence them or to make them see that what they're doing is destructive?
Well, I'd have to personally say the biggest thing we have to do is educate them, because they might be in it for money now, but what good is money when the earth is no longer here? Like, we need to have people in order to profit and to make money. So if they understand the effects that they're causing us, we may one day never not exist here. So if they can understand the fact that we need the rainforest in order to survive, and we need to have the rain. That's the bottom line. Is we need the rainforest, and no matter what the corporations do, no matter how much money it comes from it, the money won't be any good unless we're still here. So the main thing is educate the people, tell them the rainforest is gone, we have global warming. The rainforest is gone, we have no clean air. So the thing is, we need the rainforest, and they need to stop cutting down the areas that they are cutting down. Thank you.
I'm speaking number 5. Okay, no, seriously, I'd like to thank everyone for listening very attentively to 4 very well, four very good presentations. I'll ask the judges now to perform the very difficult and unenviable task of returning to the boardroom in the back and coming up with a decision. And I'll ask one of the judges then to come up here and make their decisions known to you people over there. Deliberation was quite as long as anticipated, or did I take up so much of your time? Anyway, we have one of the judges here now to present you with the winners.
I don't have the names. Very hard call. I tell you, very close. There's only about 5 or 6 points in between. Adding up the judges' 3 scores. And with that, I'll give you, kind of went in, let's see, in 4th place we'll have Daniel Ingram. In 3rd place, Fiona Sims. participants' part. Thank you.